Bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs.
We are live, episode 53 of Bows and TKOs here in the Valley on this beautiful Tuesday evening. It's heating up. Woo-wee! About 105, not terrible. High 70s at night. A lot of people like, oh my gosh, 105, that's crazy. But 105 here feels like 90 a lot of places since it's so dry. And got about probably 2 to 3 weeks before it gets really hot, when at night it's still 90, 100 plus. So that's when things get different. But excited to come and have the weekly MMA podcast. We have a couple fights that have been announced. We will be talking about Ultimate Fighter episode 2. Can't talk about 3 because that films here in a couple hours. Well, comes out in a couple hours. We will be recapping PFL. I forgot to preview it last week because the PFL is that much of a snooze fest half the time. We will preview this week's PFL in Salt Lake City on Friday. Recap UFC Vegas Fight Night 93, which was, a little bit of this, a little bit of not much. And then we have UFC Saudi Arabia early morning Saturday. That has been a little bit of a broken situation, but we do have some highlights. So excited for this week's MMA show. I plan to consistently every week record on Tuesday, put the podcast out on Wednesday. For those of you that are audio viewer or audio listeners to the podcast, probably have it up Tuesday night as I'll edit it. It takes a while on YouTube plus thumbnail. That's why I posted on Wednesday. And views have been great all over the world. People tuning in. Love to see it. I've been doing this thing for a couple of years. 53 episodes in Bows and TKOs. Was originally business and buckets. Had split the business and the MMA side. Have not jumped fully into the business again, as I just don't have the time to do it all. But it's been a crazy few weeks. I had battled some stomach bug that had me down for 2 weeks. Some diarrhea and some crazy things. It just was not fun at all. It's like one of those things for us sports fans. Baseball is a good example. You're playing fantasy sports and you get an update that your guy's sick. You're like, cool, he'll be back in a couple days. All of a sudden, 3 weeks later, he comes back and he talked about being severely ill and losing 20 pounds or so. That's the kind of stuff that I've went through. Never had that happen in my life, but battled through it. And have been recording on a new camera, my Sony a6400. I had dropped an SD card, it chipped. Putting it back in and out of the chip reader had messed up that chip reader spot that ejects and inserts the SD card. So if you ever drop your SD card and it's chipped, don't put it in. Treat it like a baby. I didn't realize the SD cards were so important. But replacing that part, there's only one Sony shop in all of the Valley. I had to go all the way to Chandler, which is like an hour drive. And it has been multiple weeks now. I think I put it in probably 3-4 weeks ago. They finally just got the parts in from Sony, but it's in New York, so they got to ship them here, have the time to fix it, get it back. So I would not have been doing podcasts with the audio or would have had to rent a camera or something. But I bought a new one. It's like the Sony Z something. A little bit cheaper, pretty good quality. Awesome little video blogger camera. Will be fun to do things on the go with this one. Maybe start taking photos with it. But the big deal with this one is that it overheats filming 4K after an hour and some change. So for long video, not good like the a6400. That thing is the champ. But now I have 2 cameras, so when I have guests in, can have 2 angles. Things happen, blessings happen, things happen for a reason. But we're back again. I'm your host, Shane Gillette, Bows and TKOs weekly MMA podcast. Let's jump right in. So some fights that we have booked. We had Marcin Tybura taking on Sergey Spivak August 10th. That is a very classic, systematic stylistic matchup here. Two grappling, heavy strikers. Very evenly matched. Should be a fun one. A few fights getting booked at UFC 305. We had flyweights Kai Kara France and Steve Erceg going at it. August 18th pay-per-view in Sydney. We have the title shot that we all assumed would happen. Dricus du Plessis taking on Israel Adesanya. About time the true African champ will be able to present themselves. For those of you that caught some of that drama. Just announced today we have Gerald Mearshart taking on Jacob Malkoun. I'm pretty sure I had recommended this fight in the Matchmaker Monday or post pod. So love to see it at UFC 305. That's a great matchup. We have a couple fights booked for August 3rd. We have Jai Herbert taking on Rolando Bedoya. And then just in recently, Farid Basharat taking on Chris Gutierrez, which there was a lot of crazy stuff happening with this week's card. Obviously, Ikram getting put in. He was supposed to fight last week, now fighting this week in the main event, which is fine because he was fighting a nobody. Now he's going right into the deep end. We'll talk about that later. We had Montel Jackson originally supposed to fight Saeed Nurmagomedov. Saeed pulled out. Montel pulled out. Farid was in. Farid was out. So Montel is left without an opponent. Farid now booked against Chris Gutierrez. He's getting a guy that was recently in the top 15, jumping up the ladder board in a very, very good bantamweight division. So we do have Ikram Aliskerov in for Khamzat Chimaev. Really bummed about that. Surfacing around the internet the past week, he was violently ill. He had battled some illness stuff, almost retired in COVID, but supposedly it's just food poisoning now. And he is not planning on retiring anytime soon. So food poisoning, maybe he had what I had. Pretty nasty stuff. And then more crappy news from a fighting standpoint. Mike Davis tore his bicep, will be out of the Drew Dober bout in Denver. Bummer, that was going to be one hell of a scrap. Hopefully Drew Dober can get a new opponent for the Denver fans for that fight night card. We had some boxing stuff go on. Not some crazy stuff, to be honest, but something worth mentioning. We had Anderson Silva and Chael Sonnen. I think it was a 5-round, 2-minute boxing bout. Saw some clips of it. The famous, or the viral one of Chael just kind of falling on himself. It really looked like a sparring match. It ended up in a draw. About as exactly what you think it would be. No guys gets any, talking shit bonuses for this fight or additive, I beat you in boxing when we were old. And that's why we don't need to see those. I don't think it was even televised in the States. You had to have something from Brazil. Then we had Tank Davis. I had no idea who his opponent was. His opponent was winning early until Tank caught him. Classic Tank fights. I really don't think Tank is the best boxer. He really waits with his one big shot. He is very good at it, a lot better than the guy he was probably fighting. But, he could get caught in losing rounds and waiting too long for his one shot. Reminds me a lot of Deontay Wilder as a small guy, but he knocked the shit out of this dude, so he gets another dub. And then there has been rumors, and everyone was kind of announcing it like it was a done deal. It wasn't, but official today, Jake Paul is actually fighting the Platinum Mike Perry, July 20th in Tampa, so same day, no more Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson is supposedly still preparing for the fall, but won't be happening in Dallas for anyone that had planned to do that all the way on the East Coast now. But last week's Ultimate Fighter episode, interesting episode. It was a lot about fighters and what was going on, because just like last year, we had the original bout that I was pretty excited to see postponed due to a cold sore recovery. So the guys were getting ready, cutting weight. Isn't going to happen, which sucks. So they have to wait, hopefully, 1 week. I'm not sure how long actually it's going to be for them in the house. But Alexa's set up her first middleweight pick. Robert Valentin, what a character he was, sleeping outside. Love it. I'm all about it. Kind of that Yuri Prohaska-like vibes. I think he's Polish as well. He had a 10-3 record. Absolutely starching Valentina's last pick, Giannis Bachar, who was 9-2. I think he was a champion in some Greek fight league. But yeah, so right away, Valentina put her number one pick at use at bantamweight or featherweight, and Alexa doing the same, and he is coming out quite victorious, which I think this week will be the guys that we're supposed to fight from the cold store, but maybe it'll be one more week. We'll see, as that doesn't come out for a couple hours. And then last Thursday, we had PFL. Nothing too crazy that just jumps off the sheet that you're like, oh my gosh. But the main event was a rematch, and Linton Vassell got the victory here in a very close split decision fight over Valentin Moldavsky. Probably one of the bigger names in the PFL, Dakota Dacheva, with a round one knockout over Chelsea Hackett. Really nice body work up against the cage. Chelsea just kind of crumbled from that. And then Thiago Santos, let me confirm this, but I don't believe he has had a win since going to the PFL. I mean, clearly he's 40. He was, kind of slipping pretty heavily in his UFC career. His last win was Johnny Walker in 2021. He lost to Magomed Ankalaev. Jamal Hill went to the PFL, had a no contest, although it was a loss against Wilkinson, but he tested for elevated TE ratio. Lost to UL in a boring fight, and now TKO to Dennis Goltsov. He should be done soon. Liz Carmouche just dominating still. Round 3 submission via armbar over Kana Watanabe. And then Talia Santos, split decision victory over Jenna Bishop. I did not watch it, but it's a very close fight. I'm sure she just grappled her way. So now we get to see Liz Carmouche and Talia Santos. Things will be getting very interesting there. This week, PFL again. This is the regular season format to set them up for the playoffs. You have to have enough points to move on. This Friday in Salt Lake City, prelims on ESPN Plus, 1:30 p.m., and main cards on ESPN at 5 p.m. We have Sadabu C, one of the bigger names, 0-1 so far, taking on Tom Breese. Brett Primus and Solomon Renfro. Robert Wilkinson taking on Joshua Silveira. Patricky Frieri taking on Bruno Miranda. That's probably one of the better fights. Impa Kasagane taking on Jacob Nito. And then Clay Collard and Mads Burnell. So some decent names, not very quality matchups, a lot of pretty heavy matchups. But that is the PFL world. But let's talk about UFC Vegas 93. I went 5-3 on my picks. I'll take it. This card was just kind of a mess overall. But that puts me at 328 wins, 163 losses, 6 no contest draws overall in my UFC picks. On the year, 135 wins, 77 losses, 3 no contests, looking to double up those losses. Almost there. If I were to recap the card, I would say a lot of grappling, some close decisions. There's a lot of conspiracy theorists with the new gloves. Not been very many knockouts with those. A lot of grappling heavy bouts, which I thought with them being lighter, it would be favoring the strikers. But the way the gloves fit, people say it's better for takedowns and grapplers. But obviously this card with the Ikram fight being taken off, one of the lighter Apex cards in quite a while. Not very many names here. And we kind of knew what we were getting into when we previewed it, when you first saw the card get built. But we did see, and plus Tatsuro, Alex, Joshua Van, all that just chaos that had happened with the flyweight mashups here. But we did get to see Tatsuro showing off his ability. It was just kind of a little preview and a little bit of a tease because of the injury. That was pretty shitty. We only got to see 2 rounds, a round and a half. And then I would say Brady Heastan's fight was the highlight of the card. Overall, I'd give it a 3 out of 10. Most people don't know even some of these guys I'm talking about. To make the card worse, Tagir Ulanbekov, 3.5 pounds overweight. So the fight with Joshua Van was called off, and that was one of the more exciting fights on the card. But some good fights we did not break down. We had Weston Wilson with a round 1 submission via triangle choke over Jekka Saragi. Jekka coming in aggressive, picked Weston up, slammed him, put himself deep into a triangle choke. That's why you don't do that, brother. And then we had Gabriela Fernandez with a split decision victory over Carly Judice. Very close, back and forth, high intensity, high volume fight. That was the fight of the night. 50 G's for Gabriella. But we're going to kick it off in the prelims. We had Nate Maness with a unanimous decision over Jimmy Flick. And really this was all about Nate continually defending takedowns and just landing his nice jab. He has a good boxing background over and over. And Jimmy really didn't have an answer for it. You know, Jimmy, as Jimmy usually does, had some moments. He had some submission attempts, a couple big overhands coming over top. But Nate was really in control this entire fight with his boxing, controlling Jimmy after Jimmy would come in for a double, get guillotine, or go to a single. Nate would turn him around and control him up against the cage. And that was really the story of the fight. Statistically, pretty heavily in favor of Nate here. He landed 139 total strikes, 89 of those significant. He had 2 submission attempts and 4 minutes and 23 seconds of control time, so almost a whole round. Majority of that on the cage. And Jimmy landed only 41 total strikes, 37 of those significant. He only achieved 1 takedown in 8 attempts. Bravo to Nate, something he's been working on. And Jimmy had 2 submission attempts and 2 minutes and 41 seconds of control time. So Nate now extends his winning streak to 2. He's 2-2 since 2022. And Jimmy starts a new losing streak. He is 1-3 since 2022. So what's next? I think Nate and Jake Hadley would be fun. And for Jimmy, how about a scrap with Odie Osborne? He could be close to being cut, but I think he'll get another chance. Match him up with Odie Osborne. And that was the only prelim bout that we had previewed. We hadn't even previewed the whole main card because it was kind of a mess. I think the Tagir Olin Bekov fight was supposed to be a prelim bout. But we had Brady Heastand with a round 3 submission via rear naked choke over Garrett Armfield. Performance of the night, 50 G's for Brady. And I'm a big Brady fan. I loved him on the season with The Ultimate Fighter. He's still a really young kid. I just didn't have the balls to pick him here. You know, he hasn't fought the level of competition that Garrett is. And boy, did he perform. I've always rooted for anyone at Sikjitsu in Spokane, Washington. Living in Missoula, Montana, just a, 3-hour drive. Would go to Spokane quite often. Spokanistan, Spokompton, that's what we like to call it. But Michael Chiesa, the whole squad. And, man, this fight, just like the lady fight, the one fight of the night, high-paced chaos. And the fight really went everywhere multiple times. In the first round, Garrett and Brady were trading shots, but Brady was the aggressor. He was pushing forward with his combos and continuing to push Garrett backwards. But what he was really doing was striking himself with those combinations into nice takedown attempts. And then Garrett continued to get up and defend those attempts. But Brady was relentless for more takedowns, and I thought was able to steal a very close round 1. In round 2, Garrett did better stuffing the takedowns. He was able to let his hands loose more and landed some clean shots. I thought he easily won round 2. And it seemed like with Brady, all the takedown attempts and some of the crazy scrambles and 50-50 positions, he started to seem like he was slowing down. But by round 3, both fighters were, their stamina bar was getting a little weak. They were slowing their pace, but they were still keeping the volume and the chaos. It was getting messy and sloppy, but Brady went straight to the grappling well in round 3 to get this fight done. In his second attempt, he very easily got Garrett's back up against the cage, swooped in the back, got the hooks in, rode him while he was standing for a while, was able to get him down. Once that happened, that rear naked choke was in, and Garrett had to tap. Again, brilliant performance by both men. Statistically, Brady landed 42 total strikes, 22 of those significant. But the big line here, 6 takedowns in 13 attempts, damn near 50%. 3 submission attempts, and he had 5 minutes and 36 seconds of control time, more than a round. Now, Garrett landed a little bit more volume, 59 total strikes, that's 17 more, 49 significant, so 27 more significant. He did land the bigger, cleaner shots. He only had 1 submission attempt, a reversal. He did have the knockdown, and 2 minutes and 57 seconds of control time. Would have been very interesting with the scorecards. I had it Brady 1, Garrett 2, and Brady was probably on his way to win round 3. But Garrett had the knockdown in round 2 and probably the more lopsided round. So you never know what the judge is, but Brady didn't let it go there. That's what you have to do. So Brady extends his winning streak to 3. He's 3-1 in the UFC. Garrett ends his 2-fight winning streak. He starts a new losing streak. He is 2-2 in the UFC. Where do these gents go next? Well, give me Brady and Daniel Santos. I think that'd be great. Again, I think Brady's like 24. We don't need to rush him. And while Garrett, I think, could match up with Brady's Ultimate Fighter foe, Ricky Turcios. I think that would be an awesome stylistic matchup. In the co-main event, only a 3-rounder, we had Miles Johns with a unanimous decision over Douglas Silva de Andrade. And this really was just a tit-for-tat fight. Miles was definitely in control, leading the dance, controlling where the fight went. And in round 1, it was more of a slow start from these guys, both kind of filling each other out. Douglas did land some more volume because he was throwing heavy combos to close distance, kind of jolting in and closing like 5 to 6 feet at a time. He also had a takedown attempt, but Miles landed the cleaner shots. He definitely was the more technical striker throughout and in round 1. But rounds 2 and 3, Miles just picked it up. He was able to outbox a tough veteran in Douglas who is durable, tough to hit, and he was able to mix in takedown attempts, although he didn't really have success with them or really go all out on them. It was just to keep Douglas guessing. And a good clean performance by Miles as he extends that winning streak. He probably knew how dangerous Douglas was and didn't want to put himself in too much of danger, so he picked him apart with his technical striking. And statistically, Miles landed 52 total strikes, 50 of them significant. He was 0 for 3 in takedowns. And Douglas only landed 36 total insignificant. For 3 rounds, that's tough to deal with. He was 0 for 1 in takedown attempts, and that was a lot of Miles coming in and out, controlling the distance there. So Miles extends his winning streak to 3. It should be at 4, but he tested positive for turnable in one of those fights, so moved to a no contest. And Douglas starts a new losing streak. He moves to 2-2 since 2022. So on Matchmaker Monday, I said, give me Miles and Cody Garbrandt. And Miles Johns already gave me a shout out on X, which was great, saying that he's always had love for no love, but the fight business is the fight business. If that's what duty calls, he's all for it. And every one of the comments said that would be a great stylistic matchup. And that's what I said, and he liked it and said he agrees. So matchmakers, Sean Shelby, Hunter Campbell, Miles Johns, Cody Garbrandt, book it for late summer, early fall. And for Douglas, he could take on a veteran, another brilliant matchmaking here. I think he could take on Rayoni Barcelos. I'm kind of surprised they haven't matched up before. But that set us up for the main event. We had Tatsuro Taira with a round 2 TKO via injury. Looked like Alex's knee buckled. Yesterday, there was no updates on it. Let's see if there's a MRI result today. Hopefully nothing torn. Day ago, waiting for MRI. Waiting for MRI. No official update. I mean, it's hard to say. It was pretty bad. But performance of the night, 50 G's to the young Tatsuro. And round 1 was a little bit back and forth, as you would expect. I did think Tatsuro landed the more damaging strikes. He was jabbing away with his length at Alex. But Alex did land some high-volume combos. He really had to come in to close distance as a shorter, smaller fighter. But he landed some big overhands. He got some stuff in the clinch because Tatsuro was clinching early, and Alex just realized when he clinched to throw in some short shots, and he was hitting Tatsuro really well. It's not like they were knockout shots by any means. But he also got the takedown, which was going to be an interesting thing to see how the grappling would be exchanged here. The takedown didn't last super long. He wasn't able to smother Tatsuro. But Tatsuro was looking clean and technical in round 1, dealing with the chaos that Alex was bringing, because Alex had to make this a messy fight. He couldn't just sit there and strike with Tatsuro. In round 2, Taira really made it his fight. He overtook Alex with his striking, was piecing him up, and then he was able to get in his back really brilliantly. Just kind of flying thing, flew on his back. The level and ability that he has is insane. He was able to get on his back, put in a body triangle. Usually you're on the back looking for the neck. Well, he put his weight to the side and was riding on his hip, and then had opposite wrist control to whip his weight and pull Alex down. And when he did that, the pressure on Alex's knee twisted, maybe tore something, hopefully not. And it's just some crazy stuff, wizardry. I mean, these are flyweights, so a little bit more likely for that to happen in these kind of divisions. You're not going to see this happen in welterweight, middleweight, probably featherweight or above. But Tatsuro is the real deal. Michael Bisping says he does not doubt he will be a future champ, and that was one of the better mixed martial arts displays he's seen. And I am just as high on Tatsuro as anyone. I would say that if he didn't get hit so much by Alex in round one, then I might say that. But still, brilliant performance. This kid is going to be an absolute problem, as he is only what? I forget how old he is. And potentially the first Japanese champion in the UFC. He just turned 24 in January. Flyweights, watch out. Just thanks to the potential that could happen here with fights like Muhammad Makayev, obviously Alexandre Pantoja. But let's break down the stats. So Tatsuro landed 43 total strikes, 31 of those significant. He did have 2 takedowns. And Alex landed 45 total strikes, 41 of them significant. So a little bit more volume. And he had the 1 takedown. But Tatsuro stays undefeated. He extends his winning streak to 16. 6-0 in the UFC. He is now moving up 8 spots in the rankings to number 5 at 24 years old. And Alex starts a new losing streak. He is 1-3 since 2022. He moves down 2 spots in the rankings to number 7. So what's next? Another matchmaker Monday move. I got Tatsuro and Brandon Royval. I think that would be great. We don't need to rush him right into the title shot. I think he can get one more shot before the title attempt. Brandon Royval is going to be game. Raw dog. And for Alex, he could scrap with Tim Elliott when he recovers from whatever knee injury, because Tim is out with an injury as well. So I'm just assuming timeline. That would be great. 2 veterans getting after it. But that was UFC Vegas 93. It was that Tatsuro and Brady high stand show. Nothing of too much meat and potatoes and excitement there. But this week we have UFC Saudi Arabia. What's different about it? Well, what's fun is it's a 9 a.m. Pacific prelim start. Wake up with your Irish coffee on ESPN. And then the main card is at 12 p.m. Pacific on ABC local television. To preview the card, it's just been a wild few weeks for the UFC matchmakers, man. We have International Fight Week next week. That's been falling all over the place. Khamzat pulling out of the main event this weekend. Ikram getting thrown in a week from his fight. So he's probably already cutting weight and everything. He had to deal with that. And Robert Whittaker taking the short notice fight of a guy he didn't even know who he was in the main event. But now Ikram has an opportunity to shock the MMA world and potentially put himself in for a title shot. So I'm previewing this at probably 5 or 6 out of 10. But some good fights we will not break down. We have Shara Magomedov, a guy you want to see, taking on Jolton Lutterback, who is making his UFC debut. Shara had a different opponent before, so we're not going to break that down because I think it'll be a dominant Shara performance. But we're kicking this thing off in the prelims. We have Mr. Perfect, Kyung Ho Kong, 36 years old with a 19-10 record, taking on Muin Tajik Gafurov, 28 years old with an 18-5 record. Now, this isn't the most sexiest of matchups, but it's 2 guys that have been there. I think it's desperation. It should make for a good fight. That's why we're talking about it. But it's 2 dudes who are just seeking success consistently in the UFC. Muin is still seeking his first win as he's nearing his prime at 28, and Kung is looking for a rebound win to get back up and try to move in further in the very, very deep bantamweight ladder board because the division is deep. Now, Kung has a BJJ and Taekwondo style. He has a purple belt in BJJ. He's on a 1-fight losing streak and is 2-1 since 2022. 12 of his 19 wins come via submission. He also is sporting a 5-inch reach advantage. Muin is a 1FC Contender Series and LFA alum. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. He's 0-3 in the UFC, including that Contender Series fight. 10 of his 18 wins are via knockout, 7 via submission. So 17 of his 18 wins are via finish. He's a finisher, likes to take the chances. And I do think Muin is going to be leading this fight with his striking and power shots. And I do think Kyung is going to be attacking his legs, looking to grapple pretty early and often. This is a very close matchup, but I'm going to go with Muin in the striking department with that advantage. And with him still seeking his first UFC win, I think he's going to get the job done as long as he doesn't just get taken down and held down for long periods of time over and over. For that reason, I am taking Muin Gafarov, but I'm not putting this on any parlays at all. Moving on, one hell of a matchup we have here. We have Nicholas the Danish Dynamite Dalby, 39 years old with a 23-4-1 record, taking on Renat the Gladiator Fakhretdinov, 32 years old with a 21-1-1 record. This really is a fun stylistic matchup. Renat has really impressed since being in the UFC. He's in the middle of his prime at 32 years old. And Nicholas is on the most impressive run of his UFC career, although he is damn near 40 years old. I think he turns 40 late summer. And Nicholas has become a complete fighter throughout his later years. And he just had a win that shocked the MMA world against Gabriel Bonfim, who is an absolute stud. Breaking this down, Nicholas is an orthodox fighter. He has a green belt in Ashihara Karate, a brown belt in BJJ. He's a Cage Warriors alum and former champion with one successful title defense. And he had 2 stints in the UFC. He went back and forth from Cage Warriors in between. And he is on a 4-fight winning streak. Now, Renat has a combat sambo style. He's a master of sport and combat sambo. He is an orthodox fighter. He trains out of American Top Team. He's on a 20-fight winning streak, with his last fight being a draw. 11 of his 21 wins are via knockout, 6 via submission, so 17 of his 21 wins via finish. Now, striking is going to be a very, very part of this fight, but I expect Renat to mix in grappling and will bring the fight to Dalby. I think he's really going to look to wear on Dalby over 3 rounds. Renat, honestly didn't look great in his last fight against another veteran, Elizao Zaleski dos Santos, which ended up in a draw. And I think Nicholas has shown that he has really good cardio over the course of 15 minutes, especially of late in his latter years. He has this new breathing technique. So I do think he's going to push Renat. I think he could potentially even squeeze out a close decision, as he may have more volume landed. This is a lot closer than the odds suggest. I think Renat's like a plus 280 or minus 280 or 320 favorite. I would put this more at like a 125, 130. I think Nicholas Dalby is going to be close, but I don't have the balls to pick him. For that reason, I'm taking Renat Fakhretdinov, but again, avoiding this on any parlays. That sets us up for the prelim headliner. We have Nasrat Haqparast, 28 years old with a 16-5 record, taking on Jared Flash Gordon, 35 years old with a 26-1 record. And again, I do think this is an interesting matchup. Jared is coming off the best win of his UFC career after a very tough stretch, and Nasrat is rolling after a few beatdowns. But he is nearing his prime, and this is not a tough out and maybe a bad stylistic matchup for him as well. Breaking it down, Nasrat is a southpaw fighter. He's on a 3-fight winning streak. He is 3-1 since 2022. 10 of his 16 wins are via knockout. He has a 4-inch reach advantage and a 3-inch leg reach advantage. Now, Jared trains out of Killcliff FC. He has a black belt in BJJ. He's a Cage Fury alum and former champion. He's on a 1-fight winning streak. He is 2-1 since 2022, and 4 of his 6 losses are via knockout. Now, this fight is probably going to just be a grappler versus striker affair. Jared has been letting his hands loose. He did knock out Mark Madsen, which was very impressive. But I do expect Nasrat to use his length and aggression to keep Jared at range. Lots of kicks, lots of jabs. Jared's going to have to find a way to close distance like Alex Perez did with combos, looking for takedowns early and often. I do expect Jared to have some success with his grappling. I'm not sure if he's going to get multiple takedowns in this fight and be able to hold Nasrat down to win the rounds. But Jared's going to bring high volume for 3 rounds. I just don't think he's going to be able to outstrike Nasrat. For that reason, I'm taking Nasrat Haparis. But again, very close matchup, avoiding this on any parlays. Moving on in the main card, we got Johnny Walker, 32 years old, 21-8 record, and the number 7 next to his name. I'm laughing while saying his name because last time he was in Saudi Arabia, he got kneed as a downed opponent. They asked him where he was. He said in the desert, which is true, but they said, you're not cognizant. We're going to call the fight off. Anyways, he's taking on Volkan No Time Ozdemir, 34 years old with a 19-7 record and the number 9 next to his name. They're fighting in the desert. But this may very well be the best matchup on the card. Definitely has fight of the night potential. Both men in their primes at 32 and 34. They have fought the best of the best in the light heavyweight division. And Johnny has shown his potential throughout the course of his career, but really hasn't had success at the upper echelon of the division with the contenders. And Volkan hasn't been super active as late, but he's looking to start his first winning streak since 2019 with back-to-back wins. So breaking it down, Johnny has a brown belt in BJJ. He's a Contender Series alum. He's on a 1-fight losing streak. He is 3-2-1 since 2022. 16 of his 21 wins are via knockout, and 5 of his 8 losses are via knockout. So to knock out or be knocked out. And this boy long. He got a 7-inch reach advantage and a 4-inch leg reach advantage. Now, Volkan has a kickboxing style. He's an orthodox fighter. He was the 2017 Newcomer of the Year. He's a Bellator alum. He's on a 1-fight winning streak. He is 2-1 since 2022. And 12 of his 19 wins are via knockout. Now, this is really going to be a fun kickboxing showdown. Johnny has the big reach advantage. The question is he going to be smart and actually utilize that effectively? Sometimes he doesn't. So if he lets Volkan close distance comfortably, it can be a long evening in the octagon for him. I do expect Johnny to do his usual wild striking attempts, flying knees, just crazy spinning things. And he'll probably bring the fight to Volkan, but look to keep him at range with those power shots, hopefully use leg kicks. But Johnny's last 2 losses, although somewhat spread out, have been via knockout. So I could see Volkan getting a big shot landed, probably reminiscent of the Jamal Hill fight. But I'm not betting on that in this one. I think Johnny is finally dialing everything in with his camp. He's learning a little bit more with his fight IQ, and he is taking this seriously and doing the right things. For that reason, I'm taking Johnny Walker. Again, avoiding this on any parlays where possible. Another great matchup, we have Kelvin Gastelum, 32 years old with an 18-9 record, taking on Daniel D-Rod Rodriguez, 37 years old with a 17-4 record. I think I said this last time Kelvin fought, but it is just wild to think that Kelvin is only 32 years old after how much he has done in the UFC since The Ultimate Fighter, and he is back in the welterweight division, which his last fight against Sean Brady, he got it taken to him. But there's a big difference between Sean Brady and D-Rod. But Daniel is past his prime at 37. He's in desperate need for a win. Both fighters absolutely have a ton on the line in this fight. Should be a doozy. Breaking it down, Kelvin is a southpaw fighter. He trains at a King's MMA. He has a black belt in BJJ, a JUCO wrestling background at a North Idaho college. He was the Ultimate Fighter 17 winner. He had the 2019 Fight of the Year against Israel Adesanya. He's on a 1-fight losing streak and is 1-1 since 2022. And he does have a 2.5-inch reach advantage. Now, Daniel is a southpaw fighter as well. He trains at a Syndicate MMA. He has a purple belt in BJJ. He's a King of the Cage, Bellator, and Contender Series alum. He's on a 2-fight losing streak and is 1-2 since 2022. And 8 of his 17 wins are via knockout. I think D-Rod will surprise. He's still a tough out with his boxing. I expect a very hungry Kelvin Gastelum to show up in this fight. He has to show up in shape, especially with welterweight division weight cut. And if he does so, I expect him to out-volume D-Rod, exhaust him with a mix of grappling and striking. And he should be able to get takedowns relatively easy in this fight. And he's always going to come forward, that Mexican fighting style. But I think Kelvin knows how big of a fight this is in his prime. You can't take losses. And for D-Rod, he's keeping his career on the track. So I am taking Kelvin Gastelum. We put him on that parlay. We marking that ish down. And we getting that bread. Moving on. We got the big dogs. We got Sergey Pavlovich, 32 years old with an 18-2 record and the number 3 next to his name. Taking on Alexander Drago Volkov, 35 years old with a 37-10 record and the number 5 next to his name. There was a social media post today about Sergey and Volkov being together, and Volkov's quote about how powerful Sergey is with his striking definitely isn't aging well for thinking about how this fight will play out. But Sergey is a savage. He is an absolute problem. And outside of Tom Aspinall, he has absolutely steamrolled his opponents in the UFC. He has not gotten out of the first round. But if Volkov could somehow eat some of these shots and get this fight late, maybe into the second half of round 2 and into the third, he could have a chance the later the fight goes. Breaking it down, Sergey trades out of Eagles MMA. He's a Fight Nights Global alum and former champion. He has the longest first-round knockout win streak in UFC history, which is 6, his first 6 UFC fights. He has the most knockdowns per 15 minutes in UFC history at 5.9. 4 of his last 7 fights have been performance of the night. He's showing out and starching mother effers. He's on a 1-fight losing streak. He is 4-1 since 2022. 15 of his 18 wins are via knockout, and both of his losses are also via knockout. So to knock out or be knocked out, life of a heavyweight. He does have a 4-inch reach advantage as well. Now, Alexander has a black belt in Sushin Gen, a brown belt in Kyokushin Karate, a brown belt in BJJ. He's an M1 alum and former champion, and also a Bellator alum and former champion. He's on a 3-fight winning streak. He is 3-1 since 2022. Little career resurgence. 24 of his impressive 37 wins are via knockout, and he has a 2.5-inch leg reach advantage. Sergey with the long arms, Volkov with longer legs. Now, really, I do think Sergey is too much of a problem with his size, the power, the length, and striking is going to get the job done early most of the time. Now, Volkov has not been knocked out since Derek Lewis in 2018, and he is the knockout king. So, obviously, Volkov isn't going to be an early out. There is, again, a chance for Volkov if he somehow starts to sway the fight late in round 2 and 3. I'm not betting on that, though. I'm not betting that the fight goes into round 3. Sergey hasn't been outside the first round in the UFC, but he did fight 3 and 5 round fights in Fight Nights Global, so anything is possible. But I'm taking the beast. He's a scary dude. I'm taking Sergey Pavlovich. We putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on to the short notice main event. We have Robert the Reaper Whitaker, a.k.a. Bobby Knuckles, 33 years old with a 25-7 record and the number 3 next to his name, taking on Ikram Aliskerov, 31 years old with a 15-1 record. Now, again, Wild Week, Kamzat out with food poisoning, so insert Ikram, who was supposed to fight last week, probably already cut weight. Although by the time this fight happened, I'm sure he was mid-weight cut, but who knows? I don't know if that's going to play a factor or not. But Robert is looking for more wins to get another title shot because he has already lost to DDP, and it was pretty ugly. and he's already lost to Izzy twice. But Ikram is getting a huge step up in competition. This is easily his toughest UFC opponent to date. Besides this, he has fought, the best he's fought is Warley Alves, who probably most people don't know, and Phil Haas, who I believe isn't even in the UFC anymore. Breaking this down, Robert has a black belt in Hapkido, Goju Ryu Karate, and BJJ. He was on the Australian freestyle wrestling team. He is a Ultimate Fighter alum and champion. He's the former middleweight champion. He's the first fighter of Australian nationality to win a UFC championship and the first New Zealand-born fighter to win a UFC championship. He had the 2018 Fight of the Year against Yoel Romero. What a banger that was. It was the 2017 Fighter of the Year. He's on a one-fight winning streak and is 2-2 since 2022. 9 of his 25 wins are via knockout. 3 of his 7 losses are via knockout as well. So again, to knock out or be knocked out. Now, Ikram has a Sambo style. He's an international master of sport and combat Sambo. He won gold in the 2016, 2012, 2014, and 2015 World Sambo Championships. He's a Brave, Eagle FC, and Contender Series alum. He's on a 7-fight winning streak, 3-0 in the UFC. His only pro loss was Khamzat Chimaev when they fought for Brave. 6 of his 15 wins are via knockout, 5 via submission, so 11 of his 14 wins have come via finish, and his only loss was via knockout. Now, Ikram is aggressive. He has had 3 consecutive finishes in the UFC, but again, there is levels to this game. He has taken on the best of the best, the former champion and Bobby Knuckles, and Robert has been finished twice since 2019, but against the former and current champion, I just don't think Ikram is as dangerous as even Paulo Costa, who Robert just beat, and Marvin Vettori, the 2 guys that Robert has won against since 2022. Now, I do think this will be a fun striking war that can possibly go the distance. I think both men have some success, but I do think Robert is going to control the center of the octagon, control the distance and pace of the fight. Robert didn't even know who Ikram was when he accepted the fight. So I'm curious to see if either man looks to grapple in this fight. Both can, but will they? It's going to be a fun one. I just think Robert is at too high of a level. He's in his prime at 33. He's on a vengeance to go back for the strap. And Ikram preparing for some random guy now with the champion, I don't think will favor him on short notice. For that reason, I'm taking Robert, the Reaper Whitaker. We putting him on that parlay. We marking it down, and we getting that bread. That sets us up for next week, a seemingly brand new International Fight Week 302 card before a week off for the July 4th holidays. This is now headlined in a short notice bout, Alex Pereira and Yuri Prochazka 2. I had that first fight as a potential Fight of the Year candidate. Didn't quite play out, but it should still be a doozy. Samurai versus, Warrior Hunter. But yeah, this card, it's been a little chaotic for it, but we have some really good matchups. I'm excited for the Nicholas Dalby, Renat Fakhreddinov fight. With the Dalby odds, we're sprinkling some bread there. We have the Johnny Walker, Volkan Ozdemir. Let's see what Kelvin Gastelum has. Can Volkov last? And then the short notice main event. So that's it for this week's episode 53. Again, I'm your host, Shane Gillette. See you next week.